Sound and speed, camera and speed, and welcome to another Create Greg video. In today's episode we will talk about very important solution which can save the day. With all that excitement of shooting high resolution footage, we're getting to the point where storing that footage become a burden to our wallet. It's not just only storing, but backing up that footage is even more important. Have you ever heard about 3-2-1 principle of data protection? So basically you're supposed to have 3 copies on at least 2 different media storage, and one of them is supposed to be offsite. That's a pro solution. Let's address 2 different scenarios. The first, you will lose your personal footage, which is a bummer because it's something you put a lot of hard work to get it. You cannot probably record that, not mentioning the sentimental aspect. What if you lose your client's footage, which can cause to put them into financial trouble to reshoot it again? Never do it. Having that said, let me walk you through step by step of how to create that reliable solution with minimum initial investment and capabilities with further expansion down the line. Is it the best and cheapest solution? I don't know, but I've put a lot of thinking and testing to be sure it's one of the best, so you can copy and apply it after watching this video or get an inspiration and came up with your own. There is a lot of technical ground to be covered, so don't get discouraged. I'll try to explain everything as easy as possible. If any question, drop them down in comments. Without further ado, like most of us, I started with this external drives which I tried to plug and squeeze all that footage on it and figure out how to organizing using spreadsheet, all that kind of stuff. In the long run, you will need a reliable solution, and I did some research and a deep thinking, and I arrived at using Synology NAS DS1621 Plus, fitted with this 3.8 terabyte Seagate Iron Wolf SATA drives. The initial cost of this solution is £1,550, and it will set you up with 14.5 terabyte of usable storage roughly. I know you would expect 24 by putting 3.8 terabyte drives, but 8 of these terabytes will be used for redundancy, so it's not 16 because the system calculated differently, so it will be 14.5. Looking at other cloud solutions like a Dropbox or Google Drive, initially you will pay less money, but you look at paying monthly fee. So if you think about 14 terabytes for instance, for a long run you will pay much more. Installation of the system is very straightforward. If we look at 3.5-inch SATA drive, installation is very straightforward because it doesn't require any tools. You just slide them and click them, then you can easily mount them into the bay. One click and you can do exactly with all of them. And pretty much you are ready to go. What is left? To power it up, connect to your local network. But before we do it, let's talk about the speed and reliability. Your setup is as fast as the slowest component of it, so getting the right hard drives from the get-go is a paramount. Seagate Iron Walls, they've got superb reputation and a track record. Not mentioning you've got health management system, so they can predict the failure of the drives and inform you in advance. On the top of that, you will get 3 years of recovery of data if something goes wrong. There's more things to that drive, but I'm not going to cover in that video. I decided to go for regular instead of Pro because you can get them cheaper. It's pretty much everything what you need for your setup. Next, I decided to go for 6-bay NAS, and this number is not accidental. It's time for a bit of math and theory. So when you look at our hard drive, it can produce the output of 200 megabytes per second, which is limitation of our system. However, if you will get 6 of that drives and configure it in the right configuration, I will explain what is right later, and then we can use all of them to read and write at the same time. So from 200 we will end up in theory in 1.2 gigabytes per second, more like a 1 gigabytes per second in real life. On the top of that, our Synology enclosure is fitted with 1 gigabit Ethernet port as a standard. Now we have to understand the difference between the bit and byte. So 1 byte equals 8 bits. So to get the through output of that Ethernet port, we need to divide it by 8. So the through outcome will be 125 megabytes per second in theory. In real life, just above 100 megabytes per second. By now we know we can produce the output of 1 gigabyte per second, so it's 10 times more. So what's the story here? And this is where the cherry on the cake comes in. I will leave that for later, so bear with me. The time has come to talk about the RAID, which is redundant area of independent disk. And this is how you configure all that disk to make the most of them. To explain that, we will look at different configuration. The simple one will be RAID 1 or RAID 0. And to explain it even better, I will pull the two drives and show you how it works. So basically, if we talk about the RAID 1, we talk about something called mirroring. So when we write data in RAID 1, the data is going to one drive and the same data is going to the other drive. As a result, instead of having 16 gigabytes from two disks, we'll have just only 8 gigabytes because the data are the same on the both. The benefit is if one of the disks fail, we've got the other one we can pull the data. Alternative is RAID 0, which is called stripping. So we will write to both of the disks at the same time, partial information to one and to the other one. So this one would allow us to speed up the output from 200 megabytes per one to 400 megabytes. So the first benefit, we will get faster speed as well as 16 gigabytes instead of 8 compared to the RAID 1. The biggest drawback, if one of the disks fail, we will lose all that data. Then you've got RAID 5 and 6 when you've got more disks, and both of them give you the best of the both worlds, so they try to mix and match mirroring and stripping. The biggest issue with the RAID itself is once we set our drives, in our case it's 3 instead of 6 because we decided to invest in 3 to start with, and we would like to add later on another 3 disks, we'll have to format them to set all that 6 disks together. So if you had some data, we have to move them, reformat the whole system, and then bring the data back. On the top of that, I need to remind we started with 8 terabyte drives. So if you'd like to expand our storage by adding, say, 3 12 terabyte drives to get even more down the line, it's not going to happen because the RAID can only work with the disk of the same size. So it doesn't matter how big extra disk we will buy, it will match the size to the lowest one. However, there is something called SHR, which is Synology Hybrid RAID, and now it's time to move to scalability. We can choose between SHR 1 and 2. 1 allow one disk to fail and we can still recover data easily. 2, of course, will give us 2 disks to fail. However, 2 will take 2 disks away from our total capacity. So 1 sounds like a better solution with still a bit of safety with 1 disk of failure. And this is how I decided to set up my RAID as a SHR 1. The moment when we start running out of space or would like to expand our storage because we will get, for instance, more money from our creative work, we don't have to stick to 8 terabytes. We can go for 312 terabytes because SHR will allow us to do it. Let's look at the right configuration on Synology website. What would happen if we go for 12 terabyte drives, which will give us in total 48 terabytes in SHR. If we decided to stick with RAID, we will be able to get just only 40 terabytes with 12 terabytes of unused space. On the top of that, 12 terabytes is the maximum capacity for non-pro iron wolf disk, so I will have 6 disks of the same performance. The last 48 terabytes is very particular number, which I will explain later on how I'm going to leverage that to get even more security. And even when you get to that point, when you run out of this 48 terabyte of storage, I've got the good news for you. This particular chassis is fitted with 2 eSATA ports at the back, which will allow you to connect expansion unit DX517, which will allow you to add additional 10 drives to already 6 you have, and you can choose whatever size of the disk you've got if you need a lot of space. How cool is that? When you think about the hardware solution, always think for the long run, what you can invest now before the hardware become obsolete, and this lovely chassis will give you a very good long run. Not to mention it's kind of sweet spot between price, reliability and performance. Let's show how this one works in action and how to go about it. The NAS is on, disks and fans are spinning, so it's time to format the system and get it off the ground. You start by typing in your browser find.synology.com, then follow on screen instruction to install DSM, which stands for Disk Station Manager, and this is very straightforward process. Wait a few minutes and voila! Then we have to log in via quickconnect.to using the details we provided during DSM installation. Now we have to set our Seagate drives into SHR. We take all the drives we want to use. Then we type the maximum capacity to allocate size, in our case 14894. We choose BTRFS format and we arrive at the summary. Click apply. Then the message will pop up that all the data on the drives will be erased, which we are happy with. And here we are, ready to rock and roll. I would like you to look at the Synology NAS as an independent computer with its own operating system, so you can install additional apps to expand its capability and give additional function, pretty much whatever you want, as long as it's reasonable, of course. Once everything is set up, we can quickly connect to our NAS by typing in our web browser your name.quickconnect.to, and then we have to log in, type the password, and the world of opportunities opens in front of us. Now let's create something which is called share folder, in the way you will be able to access all your files like you would see external drive. You go to create new shared folder, you can name it, let's call it test. You can write a description for it if needed. Test for the sake of testing, you can leave the rest as it is. We're going next. You can encrypt the shell folder, which I will not recommend because it will slow down the whole system. Next, we can enable data checksum for advanced data integrity. There is 3 exceptions you will need to click if you would like to use it, but none of them apply to us. So we've got the summary of our share folder. Let's go next. Now we can assign different access for the different people to that folder. Let's click it apply without touching it at the moment, and I will show you how to add it directly to your computer. First we go to the network to see the name of our server, which we can change here. Then we go to file services. We have to be sure the SMB service is enabled, and then we look here. So we've got 2 options how to connect it to PC and to Mac. So for Mac we have to go to our Finder, go connect to the server. We need to type SMB, create NAS, the name of our server. We have to type our name and password, and once it's done we see what kind of shared projects we can access. So we've got our 2 previous one as well as the one we created together. Let's click OK. Now we can look at our Finder. If you look at location, you see create NAS, and this one will behave from now on as an external drive which you can access easily and copy and paste files between your computer and the NAS, as easy as it is with the external drive. A very important side note here, as we connected our laptop to NAS over Wi-Fi, and the biggest issue here is the speed of Wi-Fi, because sometimes I can get like 7 megabytes per second, which is nothing if you're trying to transfer large files, which of course footage will be. The best way to go around it is to connect your computer directly to NAS over Ethernet port, as we discussed previously. The issue here, my laptop doesn't have Ethernet port, but you can buy fairly cheap Ethernet to USB-C connector and plug directly to your computer to solve that problem and get that 100 megabytes per second solution. On the top of that, I will recommend to buy additional Ethernet cable of category at least 6, because from 6 upward you will get the speed of the connection of 1 gigabit per second. And how to leverage that? Stay with me. Additionally, at the back and front, you've got additional USB ports which you can connect external drives. You cannot connect computer directly, neither SD card, because there is some known issue on Synology side. Maybe they will fix it at some point and you will be able to connect card reader. However, for the time being, you can definitely connect external hard drive and transfer footage in no time, which is very useful. Let's now show you how to connect NAS directly to computer over Ethernet port. Okay, this one is a bit of cumbersome and we need to do a few steps to make it work correctly. First, we have to go to our system preference on Mac and have to choose network. Then we connect our converter with Ethernet cable at the end. Then we have to go and set the service order. We have to be sure that the Wi-Fi is over USB LAN port. It's very important because if it's the other way around, you can use internet connection while you connect to NAS. So this one is done. Then we have to go to our USB LAN and switch from using DHCP to manual and set, let's say 10, 10, 10, 11 and set the mask 255, 255, 255 and this one is done. Now we have to set on the NAS side. Next we have to go to our control panel, choose network and set network interface on LAN 2 where our Ethernet cable is connected to manual. Our MAC was sent to 10, 10, 10, 11 and this one will be set to 10. We have to have the same mask 255, 255, 2550. Press OK and now set up the connection between computer and NAS. We have to go to our Finder. Then we go to connect the server and we have to type this time our IP address. We set for 410 to make it easier. Now we have to log into the NAS again and now we see our shared files as well as this external drive connected here. We can press OK and if you look into our Finder, we've got our create NAS over Wi-Fi as well as now we've got our direct Ethernet connection with access to our share file over full speed Ethernet port. How cool is that? Another cool feature we can set up is something called Synology Drive Server. So basically once you install that app, you can open it and choose one of your folders as a team folder. So let's go for our test and enable that. You can choose how many old versions will be kept for safety. The more you keep, the more drive space will be taken away. Let's go for 8 for instance. On the top of that, you have to download and install Synology Drive client on your Mac, and once you download it and install, you have the option to synchronize this folder instead of using Quick Connect ID to connect over Wi-Fi. Let's go through Ethernet connections. Before we type username and password, do not enable SSL data transmission encryption because it will slow down the connection and there is no need if you connect locally. Press next. Do you want to switch to Quick Connect? No, we don't want it. And now we can choose between the sync and backup task. Let's start with the backup. So basically it's a one-way connection. So this test folder we decided to use for Synology Drive client. Everything what will end up in that folder will be automatically back up to our NAS drive. If you go for sync task, that's even more interesting. Not just only everything which will be back on our computer will end up on the NAS, but whatever will be added to the NAS end up on our folder. Just imagine if you are going for video editing collaboration, we will introduce another editor to our project, colorist, sound designer, whoever, and they will create some digital assets to our project so we can give them access to our NAS over the internet so they can upload to it that digital asset, and once they end up on the NAS they will be synced automatically to folder we're using for our editing on our local computer, which allow us to get even better speed while editing. Everything will be done automatically. Another cool solution. So let's go for sync task. We have to choose the folder we want to sync. In our case will be test folder, and then what folder we want to sync on the computer with. And now computer and NAS are communicating with each other in the background to be sure both folders on each of device they are synchronized and up to the date. And now we arrive to the point where it's time to talk about the cherry on the cake. We talk about the collaboration. What if we decide to edit directly off this external drive? Yes, we can do it. We can buy extension card to plug at the back and have 10 gigabit Ethernet port, which will give us 1 gigabyte per second of the bandwidth. So all that hard drives connected together, all 6 can perform in the 1 gigabyte write and read speed, and with 10 gigabit Ethernet port now we can hook to our computer in full speed. A side note, if you'd like to connect it to the MacBook Pro, this chip converter would not do the job. You have to go for something more expensive, but it doesn't matter because you can make it work anyway. On the top of that, you can expand the amount of RAM you've got. As a standard, you've got 4 gigabytes and you can expand up to 32 if I'm not mistaken. On the top of that, you you can add additional SSD drive called NVMe, and through that drive you can even increase the speed of reading. So basically RAM and SSD will work like a buffer to keep the most used footage available with the increased speed. A side note, if you want to use SSD, set them to read only, because if you're allowed to write to SSD, this one will make your system work slower. That's the limitation of the SSD. So once you add everything up, you can use not only for backing up your footage, but this NAS can become the fully blown NAS server for video editing. Now you are getting pro, and as we know, to be pro you have to follow 3-to-1 principle of data protection. We talk about the oldest solution, but this particular solution does not guarantee that, because we talk about just one server. But there is an option with the Cloud Sync. Now let's talk about the Cloud Sync, an app we can install on our NAS drive, which will allow us to synchronize automatically the folder we want with the online cloud solution like Google or Dropbox. I'm still using Dropbox to be sure the most important data can be offloaded from the drive to the cloud in the event like my place will burn down, which is not desired, of course. On the top of that, I'm still using some of that disk to get that redundancy copy and keep them away from this drive. However, the final upgrade and the last financial step with this solution will be to go for something which is called hyper backup. And this way we draw a circle to get back to the beginning and our conversation about 3-to-1 principle of data protection. So basically I'm talking about buying another NAS enclosure, this time the S1520 Plus. So this one will have 5 bays instead of 6. As you hopefully remember, if we fill up this one with 3 8TB and 3 12TB, we'll get 48 terabytes of usable space. If you go for 5-bay chassis and fill it with 12 terabyte space, we'll end up exactly with the same capacity. What's more, this DS1520 Plus has 2 SATA ports as well, so you can add another 10 bays to that, so both of them can be exactly expanded by additional 10 bays. What is left, you need to get that additional chassis to some other location like your parents' house or move it somewhere abroad and go to the NAS setup of each Synology devices. On our chassis we'll install Hyper Backup, on the chassis on the other location we'll install Hyper Backup Vault. So once we get all that set, these two enclosures will communicate with each other, so everything which we will drop on that one for a backup will be automatically synchronized to the other one, which will be off the location of this drive, which will give us proper, fully controlled by us 3-to-1 of data protection solution. If you are still into backing up solution and you like old good-fashioned Dropbox, there is another video you might enjoy, and this one is about my workflow with the Dropbox, as well as the latest clever solution for video editing collaboration. Until next one.